Our objectives for this fourth part are to describe the structure of a nerve, identify our cranial nerves and list their function, talk about the roots and the rami, and explain the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. So a nerve is a bundle of fibers in our peripheral nervous system. And all of our spinal nerves are mixed nerves. They have sensory and motor fibers together. But some of our nerves, our cranial nerves, can be sensory or motor. So let's talk about that. Our cranial nerves serve our head and our neck. So they are coming out of our cranium. And we have 12 cranial nerves. And they only serve the head and neck except for our vagus nerve, which also comes down and serves the thoracic and abdominal region. Most of them are mixed, but we can have some that are just sensory or just motor. So this is showing you a fun schematic of where these nerves hit: our olfactory, optic, ocular, motor, trochlear, abducens, trigeminal, facial, vestibulocochlear, glossopharyngeal, vasic, accessory, hypoglossal. Blech. It's a lot. We'll work on creating mnemonic in class to help you remember all of your cranial nerves, and we'll make a cranial nerve chart. This will help you fill that out. So you need to know the name and number of the cranial nerve, what it does, and how to test it. And for what it does, not just its function, but whether it's a sensory nerve, a motor nerve, or a mixed. So again, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, vestibular, cochlear, glossopharyngeal, vagus, accessory, hypoglossal. We'll work on this in class. We'll also create a mnemonic to help us, okay? An example would be on old Olympus's towering top, a Finland viewed somehow the different names to go with the numbers of our cranial nerves. Now to remember if they're sensory, S, motor, M, or both, B, you might remember this mnemonic. Some say merry money, but my brother says big brains matter more. You can also substitute something else for brains if it helps. Our spinal nerves innervate the body. So the cranial nerves are mainly head and neck. The spinal nerves, again, come out of the body, 31 pairs named for where they arise. That's really what I want you to remember about the spinal nerves. You don't need to know the named rami or plexuses. Let's end by talking about our autonomic nervous system here. So our autonomic nervous system is the motor branch of the peripheral nervous system, and it controls our body functions automatically. Again, cardiac, smooth muscle, and glands. Somatic, as a reminder, these are our motor neurons. They have their cell bodies in the central nervous system, and they terminate on those voluntary skeletal muscles, and they're going to release acetylcholine, like we talked about with our skeletal muscle unit. For our autonomic, this is where we're going to have a chain of motor neurons. The preganglionic is going to be in the central nervous system, and it will synapse outside the central nervous system, and the postganglionic will terminate on the organ. These can be either sympathetic or parasympathetic, and they can release acetylcholine, norepinephrine, or epinephrine. So this is showing you that in picture form, the somatic nerve, and then the different types of sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now, what does that mean, sympathetic or parasympathetic? Our parasympathetic is like the rest and digest. So these are craniosacral nerves. They come from the cranium or the sacral area, and they have a very short postganglionic neuron and a long preganglionic neuron. The sympathetic, or our fight or flight response, comes from our thoracolumbar division and has the reverse, so a longer postganglionic axon. And they innervate similar organs. So here in green is our sympathetic. They're going to affect our eyes, our skins, our lungs, etc. And the parasympathetic is similar. And what these two systems do is they work for homeostasis. So the sympathetic division is going to amp you up for a fight or a flight or a activating response, and the parasympathetic, the rest and digest, is going to bring you back down. So the sympathetic is going to race, make your heart race, and the parasympathetic is going to relax your heart and bring it down. And so most of the time we're having competing inputs from both of them, but in times of stress, we're really going to bump up that sympathetic response. So again, the sympathetic is our fight or flight response. You got to know some of the outputs here, like increased cardiac output, increased respiration, decreased digestion. So you want to think, I see a bear. What is my body going to do? Well, my heart rate's going to race. I'm going to take in a lot more oxygen so I can run away from this bear. And your body's going to turn off those unneeded things. Like, we don't have to worry about pooping or digestion right now. We have a bear. Parasympathetic, or rest and digest, you want to think, what would I be doing after Thanksgiving dinner? I'm going to focus on digestion. I'm going to slow my heart rate down, etc. So you want to think with this list of functions, which one are more sympathetic or parasympathetic? See if you can pause the video and determine that from the list. Okay, now that you're back, here are some answers. Again, parasympathetic, we're going to increase digestion, increase and relax our sphincters to allow for voiding, turn down our heart. But for sympathetic, we're doing the opposite. We're turning off our digestion, we're bringing glucose into our bloodstream, dilating our bronchioles to breathe more, and increasing the rate and force of our heartbeats. Our parasympathetic is going to constrict our pupils and cause us to relax our eyes. Sympathetic is going to be the opposite. Let's take in all that light, dilate our pupils, stimulate all sorts of functions. Again, rest and digest, fight or flight. So you want to think about those two headings when you take apart the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system.